Praise the Emperor for his sacrifice. As he endures, so shall we. We who are hunters of demons shall strive eternally in his name. Let's talk Codex Grey Knights, guys.
Anvil of War! Review Rollout!
I'm starting a Grey Knights army. So we're going to talk about the Codex in this video, but first, before we hit the table, I would like to extend a huge thank you to our subscribers. And if you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe down below. And as always, a huge thank you to our sponsors over at Red Dragon. Without them, I couldn't have this book and I wouldn't be starting a whole new army. Although I feel like that was planned. Alright guys, let's get to it. And we're back over at the table with the Codex, Grey Knights. Not supplement, so they are their own army, which is good to see. Now, let's crack it open. Screaming faces, oh my god. We're just gonna basically power through this first part, guys. I mean, the Grey Knights players, they know all the lore, and they probably have the book themselves, and if you're debating Grey Knights, I strongly suggest picking this up and reading it through. There's always some great stuff at the front of the GW codices. Got a nice little blurb there. Gorgeous new artwork. Really love what they're doing with the Grey Knights. Aesthetic-wise, with CROWE and stuff like that. So, this 666th chapter goes into Titan. You're not supposed to know any of this, by the way. Shh. Goes through the chapter organization. We actually have the Brotherhoods, and we actually get to play with the Brotherhoods now in the new edition with the new book. Running through them. The most famous ones like Voldis's and Stern's, the Ward Makers, and then it gives a blurb on each of the other 7. Nice little excerpt here. It's missing in the Orc book. I actually don't really like that, but I enjoy that it's in the Grey Knight book, and it's just a group of nice strike marines going after some Nurgle filth. So really suggest giving this a read. Inspiration, lots of inspiration there. Chambers of Purity, so it goes through the Purifier Order, the Hall of Champions, so that's your paladins, stuff like that. Warzone, Manask, that they're part of. The Armory of Titan, Hidden Tapestry, just more lore, right, guys? The Heraldry of Titan, so it actually gives you, shows you how, each Grey Knight has their own personal heraldry, and it talks about what each of the symbols means. So, how a shield reflects elevated standing, stuff like that. Goes through all of it. Swords denote deeds that turn the tide of a war, so you can see these and then they have the Mark of the Purifier Order on their heraldry as well. Lots of cool stuff in here in this catalog section. Land Raiders, best tank in the game. Love them as Grey Knights. I have a Banisher. And I'm looking to get a Crusader or a Godhammer. I'll probably magnetize it, to be honest. But I definitely want 2. Lots of play there. Fun play. Maybe not the most competitive, but lots of fun play. The new CROWE model, gorgeous. There's a meme going around where he's just staring at Voldis, which is the latest model before CROWE for the Grey Knights, and it's just know your place trash, because he's looking down at him, and he's bigger than he is, even though he's in Terminator armor. Yeah. Nice big centerfold fighting Be'lakor and his demonic host. And if anyone's taken out Be'lakor, you know it's going to be the Grey Knights. It's what they do. It is what they do. Now we're actually into the rules. So we'll go through this in more detail, much more detail than what we just covered, obviously. Showing you any of the new changes and stuff like that. And I'll give my input on some certain things as well. Combat Patrol, this is the new Combat Patrol box they'll be coming out with. It's going to be the only way that you actually get 5 strikes by themselves now, because they currently sell them in a 10-man box. So if your list is missing 5, and you want a Dread Knight and always more Terminators, even though they're not as good, kind of thing. Very good starting bundle for the Grey Knights. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. So, detachment abilities. Grey Knights detachment gain the Brotherhood command ability, gain the Aegis ability, and Grey Knights troops in a Grey Knights detachment are OBSEC. So Brotherhood command means that you can only include a maximum of 1 Grandmaster or Brother Captain in each detachment from your army. So it's going along the lines of the narrative that we've seen. It's like you're not going to have 3 Brotherhood captains or 3 Grand Masters in a single detachment, right? That's foolish. These are the most powerful Space Marines in the Imperium, guys. They are where it's at. The Ultramarines don't have anything on these guys. Sorry, Ultramarines fans, but it is what it is. And each brother captain and grandmaster must be from a different brotherhood. So you can include multiples, not in the same detachment, but they must be from a different brotherhood because there's only one in each brotherhood. It's the way it is. Now the Aegis, each model in this army, or each time a model in this unit loses a wound as the result of a mortal wound, on a 5-up, the wound is not lost. Fantastic. With such a low model count army, the Grey Knights really hurt with mortal wounds, or could. Now having a 5-up shrug to those mortal wounds because they're so pure of soul. Really super fluffy, really good for them. And if the unit's a psyker, add 1 to deny the witch tests. So, sure, we lost the +1 to cast from last edition, but we still kept the +1 deny, which I think fits the Grey Knights better. So if we had to lose 1, I'm glad we lost the +1 to cast. There's also other ways to get that back. We'll touch on that later. And then it goes through the whole Brotherhood of Psychers. So each Brotherhood has an associated psychic power. So basically that means that when you choose your models from a Brotherhood, they know the power that's on their data sheet, or the ones that they can choose, in addition to the power associated with their Brotherhood, and everyone in the army knows that, as long as they have the Brotherhood keyword, and we'll touch on that, because that doesn't include Hallowed Knights. Now, Hallowed Knights are stuff like CASTELLAN CROWE, Purifiers, Paladins, Drago, guys who are they operate outside of the Brotherhoods, right? And Warlord traits. So each Brotherhood has an associated Warlord trait. If the Grey Knights Brotherhood character model gains a Warlord trait, they can have the relevant Brotherhood Warlord trait instead of one from page 67, which includes the rest. And they each have a stratagem built in as well for the Brotherhoods. Lots of play, lots of possibilities, lots of combos. And that's what I like, is it's not just one Brotherhood that stands out as the best. Everyone take it if you want to win or play competitively. There's lots of play within multiple Brotherhoods. And that's something they did really well, and I appreciate that. Moving forward, we get right into the Brotherhoods. So we have 8, or the 8 laid out. We have the Sword Bearers. These are like your more vehicle-driven ones. A lot of play with, say, NEMESIS Dread Knights, or Land Raiders. Best tank in the game. Blades of Victory. Another really good one. This one's really aggressive. They push forward. A lot of, like, they're... you get a pregame move with your Warlord and a friendly core unit within 9 inches of him pregame as the Warlord trait. You can reroll charges as part of Inescapable Pursuit. Mortal wounds on the charge from their stratagem. So they're all about the melee. The Ward Makers, these guys, this is Voldus and Stearns. Lore Master, really good Warlord trait. If you cast on an 8, the enemy cannot deny it. So you got those powers, like you really want to get... say Gate of Infinity or something like that off. It's like, okay, cool, cast on an 8, you can't deny that, forget it. Prescient Brethren, some really good stuff to like debuff enemy movement, stuff like that. They take D6, they take mortal wounds if they perform any kind of move, so can really play with their mobility. Some fun stuff there. Preservers can give you like 5-up shrug, in combination with an apothecary, stuff like that. Also buffs dreadnoughts. It increases aura abilities, rapiers, buckets of attacks coming out of these guys. Lots of mortal wound spam can be done by the rapiers. They're one of the fan favorites right off the bat, and I can see why, for sure. The Exactors. So, I actually really haven't read much into the Exactors, but Fire's a Covenant, so... we'll just look at their power here. Has a warp charge value of 5. If manifested, select one enemy unit within engagement range of the Psyker's unit. Roll a d6 for each enemy model in that unit, and on each roll of a 4+, they suffer 1 mortal wound. If the enemy suffers an additional mortal wound, if the Psyker has the Psychic Epitome Warlord trait, the enemy suffers an additional 1 mortal wound to the unit, not to each model. So there's no, like, every model in the unit takes 2 mortal wounds. No. I mean, that'd be sweet, but... there is a cap there. So it's good horde clearance, right? You can also make auto pass morale tests in an aura around your Warlord. So that's actually pretty good, because morale could really hurt a low model count elite army like Grey Knights. And then my personal favorite is the Silver Blades, and not necessarily for their competitive edge, but just the lore behind them. They're kind of like the center of excellence for the Grey Knights chapter. It's like they train and master every form of warfare, because that's the training section, almost. Like, new Grey Knights come in, they go to the 8th Brotherhood, they learn from the best to do everything they can, and then they move wherever else they're needed within the chapter. So, lots of cool lore around the Silver Blades. That'll make them my favorite. You can make your Stormbolters pistol weapons in melee, which is, on a big unit, that's great. Yeah, lots of cool stuff there. Wisdom of the Prognosticars. So these are your character upgrades. There's a lot of really good ones in here. I'm going to pick one or two from each one. So you have the Visions of the Augorium, the Gifts of the Prescient. Now, named characters cannot be given these upgrades. You basically pay points or power level, depending on how you're scaling your game. To gift a Grey Knights character, you can't double down on these. Characters can't take two, stuff like that. And in Crusade, you can only do so by consult the Prognosticar's requisition, so you can't include it in your order of battle unless you pay for that requisition. And I'm pretty sure that's only a once per, like, you spend it, and then if you use the vision or the gift, you have to go back and spend the requisition again to get another Wisdom of the Prognosticars. So, but like I had said, there's lots of good stuff in here. I really like Noble Death. So it basically gives double obsec, and we'll read it out. Once per battle, in your command phase, this model can experience this vision. If it does, until the start of your next command phase, it gains the following ability: Noble Death Aura. When it grenades core character units within 6 inches of this model, it gains the obsec ability, and it can set to defend. So even if it's out in the open, it can set to defend, which is really cool. If a model in that unit already has OBSEC, then it counts as one additional model when determining control of the objective marker. So you can have a 5-man Terminator unit count as 10 men. Same way, you can have a 10-man strike unit count as 20 men. Lots of cool play there if you have a center objective and it's really hotly contested. And the other really good one everyone seems to like from here is Foretelling of Locus. So after both players have deployed their armies, select up to 1 Grey Knights core unit from your army, or up to 3 Grey Knights core units from your army, and redeploy them. If the mission uses strategic reserves, any of those units can be placed into strategic reserves without having to spend additional command points, regardless of how many units are already in strategic reserves. So you can put over 50% of your army in reserves. You don't have to spend CP to do so. It's really good. If both players have abilities to redeploy units, roll off, winner chooses who redeploys units first. So a lot of really cool play there. It's your basically, you can deploy, and if you get first turn, you can redeploy to be more aggressive, or you can deploy to be more defensive if you get if you're forced to take the second turn. Really good, and I mean, it's kind of reflected in the fact that it's a 30-point upgrade for a character, right? But fantastic. Gifts of the Prescient, everyone's favorite one. You're going to see this on almost every Grandmaster and Dread Knight armor, or at least one per list. So, the Servant of the Throne. Once per battle, when he's selected as the target of an attack, you can use this gift. If it does, then until the end of the turn, he has 3-up invuln save. So, you get shot at in the shooting phase, you pop it, 3-up invuln to all the attacks, and it carries on to the assault phases. So, if they decide to charge you, you still have 3-up invuln. Really helps your big, beefy Warlord survive. And the other really good one I like is Gem of Noctu. So once per battle, when the bearer is selected to manifest psychic powers, use the gift. If you do, until the end of the phase, each time he attempts to manifest from the Dominus discipline, add 2 to the attempt's psychic test. So you can stack this with, say, the Warlord or the Ward Maker's Warlord trait to try to fish for that 8+, and then auto passes. You can try to fish for not super smites, sorry, because it's not from the Dominus discipline, but you can try to, basically get that better, make it harder to deny or impossible to deny if you chose the Ward Makers as your Brotherhood. Really cool stuff with the Gifts of the Prognosticars. Now moving forward over into stratagems. Lots of good stratagems, lots of utility here. So I'll just pick like one or two from each section we have. So psychic channeling. Each time the psychic test is taken for a unit, roll an additional d6 and discard one of the dice. So add a d6, discard the lowest or whatever, to help guarantee your powers off. Psychic onslaught, really useful, especially with the heavy weapons now on Grandmasters and Dread Knight armor. So use this stratagem in your shooting phase. When a Grey Knight Psyker from your army is selected to shoot until the end of the set phase, each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack with a psi weapon, so that's your silencers, incinerators, and psi cannons and their heavy variants. Add 1 to the strength characteristic of the attack and improve the armor penetration characteristic of that attack by 1. So it really helps you get damage through at range with your psi weapons. Awesome. Empiric Declamation, really good one from the Chaplain. So this is basically, you can use it after your command phase, and it's automatically inspiring. You don't roll. So you can use a chant from your Chaplain in your command phase as you normally would, but then later on in the turn, or if he comes down and have Deep Strike, you can pay 2 command points, pick a unit, or pick a chant, and it automatically goes off. You don't have to roll it. It can't be denied like Psychic Powers. Really good stuff to guarantee some of your nice combos that maybe you've stacked with your Chaplain go through. And Psychic Locus. Now, this makes the Brother Captain, in my opinion, worth taking in almost every list. 6-inch aura of +1 to cast. Sure, it's 2 command points, but +1 to cast in a 6-inch aura, so that can affect so many units of your army, and he can come down, he can help units reroll charges with their powers, he can help them reroll wounds. Lots of good stuff. Highly recommend it. Big fan. Now we have our requisition stratagems. So your extra relic, your extra warlord trait, your second warlord trait, and you can also give a relic to a regular sergeant in a unit. So Justicar Paragon or Knight of the Flame, give him one of these relics. They only list the Domina Liber Daemonica, the Sanctic Shard, the Algorium Scrolls, Stave of Supremacy. So they must be different, and it must be different to different models. But yeah, if you want to beef up one of your Knights of the Flame or your Paragons, you can give them a relic. Why not, right? Fight on the move. Really happy with this one. Basically, your Grey Knights teleporter units, that's your Interceptors or your Dread Knights if you've bought teleporters for them. They can fall back and charge and shoot. Really useful. Helps you get around the big guns never tire -1 penalty for shooting into your own melee. Lets you do mortal wounds on the charge if that's an ability that you have or a stratagem that you pay for. Really helpful. Or it lets you just get out of dodge, right? If your Interceptors are stuck down, you can hop in a melee and go off and do some stuff. Really useful. Haloed and Soulfire. So you set up from Teleport Strike. -1 to subtract 1 to the attack's hit roll for any attacks made against that unit. So they basically come down. I'm not going to quote the Custodians because they have from the Golden Light, but they're haloed in Soulfire. So just this pure warp flame surrounds them and makes them harder for the enemy to target, blinds them maybe, stuff like that. Really cool. Alloy of Disciple or Alloy of Disciplines. So you can swap out powers for your Paladins. Mid-game, so it's really good if you combat squad them. You can give each set of paladins a different power, depending on how they're armed for their different roles. Hexagrammic Wards. Roll an additional d6 and discard the lowest result from for denies. Really good, especially because we already get the +1 army-wide. Miss the Demos, that's your new smoke screen, stuff like that. This is all your war gear. Cybolt has changed. So it's 1 CP or 2 CP, depending on the size of your unit. And if it has 6 or more models, costs 2. Any less or 5 or less, it costs just the 1. So basically, any bolt weapons that the unit makes a ranged attack with, unmodified 6s ought to hit automatically wound, and it increases the armor penetration characteristic by 1. So can really help you get wounds through on tougher stuff if you just need to plink off some. You got a Dark Eldar Raider down to 1 or 2 wounds, and it's like, okay, well, all my heavy weapons are gone. What do? I don't want to charge it. I want to charge this other thing. Cybolt ammunition, storm bolters into it. Right on. Get those last little bit of wounds through. and stuff like that. And you can also use it for one command point on a Land Raider Crusader, because it doesn't specify Psyker, it just says Grey Knights unit. So Land Raider Crusader with its 12 twin-linked bolters and its Storm Bolter on top can, for 1 CP, dish out a lot of Psychic DACA. Could be really fun, right? Good horde clearing, stuff like that. So now we're going to move forward from stratagems and over towards the relics. So there's lots of really good relics in here, and I'm just going to pick 2 or 3 of them, read them out to you guys. Yeah, let's get into it. Alright, so we're over here at the relics, and the one that stands out to me and a lot of other people, Sigil of Exigence. Once per battle, in your opponent's shooting phase, when the bearer is selected as the target of a ranged attack, it can activate this relic. If it does, remove it from the battlefield and set it back up on the battlefield anywhere that is more than 9 inches away from enemy models. If the bearer is no longer an eligible target, out of line of sight, stuff like that, your opponent can then select a new eligible target for any attacks that had been targeted at the bearer. So our Nemesis Dread Knights our Nemesis Dread Knight Grandmasters cannot be hidden. They're over the wound cap for lookout sir, stuff like that. They get targeted by big nasty weapons, las cannons, multi-meltas, other foolishness, right? Well, surprise, you pop this relic and then they redeploy. You can either use that to redeploy closer to the enemy and put the pressure on, right? Or you can get them at a dodge, hide them behind a building, stuff like that. Just keep them safe for later on in the game if they're the main source of your psychic buffs. This can also be combined to great effect with the Servant of the Throne upgrade. So you can use this to get closer to them, force their shots, or get close to them, force the pressure, and then when they try to target you again and you're only 9 inches away, or just outside of 9 inches away, you can pop Servant of the Throne, get your 3-up invuln save, right? Just keeps them on the board longer, really gets them up in their face, really puts the pressure on, because Dread Knights can do a lot of damage now, especially Grandmasters. Yeah, big time relic right there, Sigil of Exigence. Other ones that I really like the look of is the Sanctic Shard. So each time a deny the witch test is made for the bearer, if the result is an unmodified, or was an unmodified result of 8+, or it was greater than the result of the psychic test, the deny the witch test is passed. So even if they roll a 12 on their smite and they get a super smite with Magnus, and you're like, oh god, well, pop the Sanctic Shard. And then they can, you have the Sanctic Shard, so if you cast, or if you try to deny, even if it's an 8, they don't get that power off. Really good for your character with multiple denies, and that's the Librarian. Lots of play there. And then another good one I really like is the Artisan Nullifier Matrix. Now this is also another Librarian only, and the bearer gains the Artisan Nullifier Matrix aura. When a Grey Knight Psyker within 9 inches of the model, each time the psychic test is taken for the unit, it never suffers perils in the warp. So if you are against those armies that force perils on any doubles, or you're against Kronos where if you fail, you take perils regardless, this really helps, and perils suck. Like, sure, we get the 5-up shrug to mortal wounds and stuff like that, but perils still suck, right? So you can easily turn off perils just by bringing that one relic. Super useful. Big fan. And now we're over to the psychic powers. So we have 2 sets of psychic powers, the Dominus Discipline. Now this is more for your characters, and they get to pick and choose these. So we have everyone's favorite Gate of Infinity, Sanctuary. It's now just a flat 4-up invuln. It's no longer a +1 to your invuln. So you can give it to a unit that has no invuln save, like a Land Raider. Because it doesn't say Grey Knights Psyker, as long as they're within 18 of the Psyker. So until the start of your next Psychic phase, models in the unit have a 4-up invulnerable save. Land Raiders would be even better than the best tank in the game if they had an invuln save. So you can definitely do that with Sanctuary, or you can give it to a big brick of Interceptors that you just shunted up the field, and now they're contesting your enemy's home objectives, stuff like that. Really useful. Empiric Amplification, love this one. So basically, you add 1 to the damage characteristic of attacks made with Psi or Nemesis weapons. So your Nemesis weapons become flat damage 3 for the most part. Even more in some cases with some of your characters because they have special versions of Nemesis weapons. Dread Knights can be like, your hammer can be D3 plus 4 damage, stuff like that. Really cool. And your psi weapons, it makes your psi cannons go to damage 3. It makes your silencers now become damage 2, or your incinerators become damage 2. Empiric Amplification is a great power. You should be seeing it multiple times in most lists. Vortex of Doom, another good one. It is the closest enemy model, suffers 2d3 mortal wounds, and then every unit within 3 inches of him suffers 1 mortal wound. So really good if you're clamped around a character or something. You just big clumsy units, target the Vortex of Doom. Plus, it's really fun to say, the Vortex of Doom. Warp Shaping, swap out the tides. This is now the only way you can change the tides. I mean, it was before as well, but now it's like Warp Shaping. They made it much easier to cast. It's a 4 instead of a 5. Or maybe it's changed. Or maybe it hasn't changed. I can't remember. But Warp Shaping is really good for swapping out your tides, which really help the Grey Knights. Ghostly Bonds, movement restrictions, stuff like that. Now, moving over to the Psychic Discipline, we have the special rule at the top called Psychic Confluence. So each time a Grey Knight Psyker is selected to manifest psychic powers, and it can attempt to manifest any of the psychic powers that is known from the Psychic Discipline, even if that power has already been attempted and manifested by another, or to be manifested by another unit that phase. So basically, it's like Smite. You can stack them. Not on the same unit, but you can cast them multiple times in a phase with different units. You just add +1 to the warp charge value each time, exactly like Smite. And Sanctic Discipline, these are the ones that are built in to the unit's profiles. So a lot of the units now have, they no longer get to choose. We'll touch on that later, but you have a unit and it's built in with its own power. Except for Paladins, who actually get to choose 2 of these. So we have, and some of them actually most of them changed quite a bit. Astral Aim, reroll 1 hit roll when resolving the unit's attacks in the shooting phase. Each time a model makes a ranged attack, it does not benefit, or the target unit does not receive the benefits of cover. Now this also affects dense cover, so it allows you to ignore the -1 penalties from dense. So it's still very useful, and it's built into Purgators, obviously, or oddly enough. And then Purge Soul, I mean, it's a weaker Smite, I guess. No, I don't think anyone actually has this built into their profile, so this would be one that you had to choose. So Paladins could choose it, I guess. Hammerhand arguably got much better. It is now on a 5, reroll the wound roll. Now, your Strike Marines, your Terminators, and your Dread Knights have that built in. So those are the ones, they'll be up fighting in melee, and they'll be fighting on the points, and Hammerhand's going to come in a lot of use for them. Purifying Flame, so it's almost like our own Super Smite. Now Purifiers have this built in, and again, you can give it to Paladins. So basically, on a warp charge of 5, the closest enemy unit within 9 inches and visible suffers 3 mortal wounds. But if it's cast on an 11+, it's D3 plus 3. So it's a more what's the word I'm looking for? It's a more consistent Smite. So you're not really rolling the D3 most of the time. And Purifiers and CASTELLAN CROWE have it built in that they are +1 to cast it. So Purifying Flame is really good as well. Armor Resilience, now this is built into your Dreadnoughts and your Venerable Dreadnoughts. So warp charge value of 6, add 1 to armor saving throws, so you can give your Dreadnoughts a 2-up save, or a 1-up save in cover. Paladins as well, you can give them a 0-up save in cover with Armor Resilience. Lots of play there. Ethereal Castigation, this is built into your Interceptors. So this is the old, the old power that could let you move, shoot, move in the psychic phase. So you move up, and then you cast the power, you shoot, and then move again. So you can either duck in and out of cover, you can get back into a transport, stuff like that. Really useful, Ethereal Castigation. Or you can just use it to move up the board, because Interceptors have a 12-inch move, and they ignore all intervening terrain and models, right? So that's a 24-inch move for getting that power off. Really good if you want to apply pressure or capture the midfield early on. So that's the psychic powers. Now we got the litanies. So this is your chaplain obviously can't recite these litanies, and we have a lot of them are very similar to the Marine ones, like reroll the hit rolls, but it's called Litany of Expulsion. The one that everyone's buzzing about, Words of Power. So Grey Knight's core character unit within 6 inches of the priest. Anytime they make a melee attack with a Nemesis weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6 successfully wounds the target 1 additional time. And if the Tide of Convergence is dominant for your army, they also suffer 1 mortal wound. That stacks with the mortal wounds from Tide of Convergence. We'll touch on the tides later, but that's incredibly good. Chaplains are pretty good. Yeah, you as you can see that our HQ slots are very competitive right now. Like there's lots competing for those limited slots. Warlord traits. So some old favorites with rebranded and stuff like that, and then some other really good ones as well. So First the Fray is my favorite. Add 1 to advance and charge rolls made for the Warlord. And if the Warlord has made a charge move this turn, until the end of the turn, each time a friendly Grey Knight's core unit declares a charge against an enemy unit that's within engagement range of this Warlord, add 1 to the charge roll made for that unit. So basically, as long as you charge the same thing that your Warlord charged, plus 1 to charge. He literally is actually first to the fray. He has to be the first one in to gain that. Now, as an Orc player, I like the Orc Warlord trait that does that, and I like this one too. It's very good. Demon Slayer, I think this one's built into Drago. Yeah, it is. Makes 1 additional attack each time the unit's selected to fight. And if they target a demon unit, invulnerable saving throws cannot be made for that attack. So the invulnerable saves are the one things that's keeping like the demons in, gives them some defense against our Nemesis weapons. And now with that Warlord trait, especially on something like Drago and Empiric Amplification, you can have the the Titan Sword be flat damage 4, ignoring all invuln saves. Yeah, really good. Nemesis Lord. This is another good one for, say, Nemesis Dread Knight, because they have their sweep attack with their sword, so they can have up to 12 attacks. If the Warlord makes a melee attack with a Nemesis weapon, unmodified hit roll of 6 automatically wounds. So if you're going up against a big thing and you just want to get the attacks out, you can sweep and still hurt something without having to use the strike profile or whatever it's called. And lastly, we have Psychic Epitome. So at the start of your each psychic phase, select 1 Grey Knight Psyker unit within 6 inches of the Warlord. So it doesn't even have to be himself. Until the end of the phase, each time they manifest a Witchfire psychic power when resolving that psychic power, if an enemy unit suffers any mortal wounds, they suffer an additional mortal wound. Okay. Vortex of Doom, 2d3 plus 1. Mortal wounds to the target, or the Purifying Flame. Potentially d3 plus 4 mortal wounds to the target. And Smite can be potentially d6 plus 1 mortal wounds to the target. Lots of play there. Really good. Because we have regular smites now. We don't... that's another thing I should have touched on. Grey Knights they just have normal smites. Before, we only had our smites only did 1 damage unless it was against demons. And then it was 3. And then there was a tide that could make it flat damage 2 against everything, or 4 damage against demons, or 4 mortal wounds against demons. Now it's just we have the same smites as everyone else. So we have the potential to go to Super Smite and stuff like that. Chapter approved rules, so these are your secondaries. I really like Purifying Ritual, and I think a lot of Grey Knights players do as well. So it's a progressive objective, and it's actually a good one for Warpcraft, because usually Warpcraft just hurts the Grey Knights with Abhor the Witch and stuff like that. But you score a number of victory points at the end of the battle round, shown on the table below, with the number of victory points scored depending on how many units from your army successfully completed the following psychic action in that battle round. So it's a psychic action, and because all of our units are psychers, and it doesn't specify psycher character, all of our units can potentially do this. It's a warp charge value of 5. In your psychic phase, this action can be performed by any number of units in your army. In your psychic phase, if a Grey Knight Psyker from your army is within 3 inches of the objective marker, or an objective marker, it can attempt to purify it by performing this psychic action. Each objective marker cannot be purified more than once in the same turn. So if you have 4 objective markers, 5 objective markers, it doesn't matter if the enemy's near them, it doesn't matter if you hold them, but you can attempt to purify them. So you get the number of victory points at the end of the battle round for the number of purified objectives. And you can really rack them up with this. I mean, sure, you only purify one, you only get one, but it gets up, like, if you purify 4 or more, you get 6 victory points. That's 6 victory points a battle round. You can max out that secondary in 3 turns. It's really good. Sure, you're giving up psychic powers, but you have lots of psychers in your army. And especially in the first turn, you're not going to be in range of things like smite. You're not going to be in range of a lot of stuff like that. So this is definitely a secondary to keep in the back of your mind when it comes to choose them, if you're playing match play, obviously, and stuff like that. Name generator, always cool. Always cool. Helps you name your force if you're doing narrative-driven stuff. Crusade rules. I said it in the Orc video, and I'll say it again. I can probably do a whole video on the Crusade rules, and I'm going to have to talk to the other guys here, but I think we should be doing Crusade videos. Just for the narrative people out there, and most of us are narrative-driven here at the channel as well. This is so cool. You can pick a character from your army, doesn't even have to be your warlord, and then you choose a demonic nemesis for him. And it's later on here in... like, sure, you got your requisitions, your honored titles, stuff like that. You got your battle traits for your Terminator-specific units. The Crusade Relics, which there's one actually geared towards each Chaos God, and then there's other ones. It's awesome. Because, first and foremost, we are the Demon Hunters, right? So, sure, we have a lot more play now that we can target. We can swing with the big boys against different armies, but our bread and butter is still demons. So yeah, creating your nemesis, like you select one of the units to be the demonic nemesis. It can be something as simple as a Master of Possession or a Herald. It could even be a Demon Prince or a greater demon, a Bloodthirster, Lord of Change, and he becomes the nemesis, and he kind of follows around your character, lurking in the shadows as you go through your crusade. And if you play against a Chaos player, your nemesis can actually show up on their side, and they get another character added to their army who becomes your demonic nemesis. And if you kill him, you get a whole bunch of... if you kill him in the battle, you roll to see if he was simply just wounded or if he's actually fully banished. And if you fully banish your nemesis, you actually get a whole bunch of experience. You get to choose a Psychic Fortitude. And then you can roll for another character to have another demonic nemesis pop up. So, like, your Grey Knights are literally on their crusade just hunting down these demonic nemesis. Yeah. It's so fun. Can't wait to get this going. And then it goes through the Crusade army that someone at the studio has done. And, again, really cool. Awesome basing scheme there, too, with the lava and stuff like that. Now we're getting into the data sheets. So this goes towards Knights of Titan as your abilities. So you have and They Shall Know No Fear, Bolter Discipline, and Masters of the Warp. So, and They Shall Know No Fear and Bolter Discipline are the same as your normal Marine book, because they are still Astartes. And then Masters of the Warp, now these are your tides. This is what makes the Grey Knights stand out, right? You, like, Death Watch have their doctrines, or, yeah, their doctrines or whatever. Or, I forget already. But, anyways, we have our Tides of the Warp. Now, the big change from last edition is that once you choose a tide and you switch out of it, you can no longer hop back to that tide for the rest of the game. So, before the game, you start in the tide. You pick it at the beginning of the game, so you can kind of tailor it, which is really good. And then, moving forward, the only way you can swap it out is with the Warp Shaping Psychic Power, like I touched on. So, if you lose your Psyker who brought Warp Shaping, you're stuck in that tide for the game. And if you started in a really good tide and then you swapped out of it for a more defensive one, then you can't go back, kind of thing, right? So it introduces that kind of tactical play there. But there's we'll go through the tides really quickly. Tide of Convergence adds 6 inches to the range of psi weapons the model's equipped with. Each time they make an attack in melee with a nemesis weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6, target suffers 1 mortal wound in addition to any other damage. So that's where it stacks with, like, Words of Power and stuff, and you can have, like, these falchion-wielding Grey Knights who just spit out mortal wounds. It's really cool. Tide of Clarity, or Celerity. Each time you roll an advance roll, rolls of 1s to 2 count as 3. Same with charges. Any roll of 1 or 2 counts as 3. So it helps you get up the board quicker. It helps you get into melee quicker. Tide of Shadows. If you're in the open, you receive the benefits of light cover. If you're in light cover, you receive the benefits of dense cover. So you get +1 to your saves in the open. You get -1 to hit if you're standing in cover. Really good. One of the best tides, I think, to start in, because even if you don't get first turn, you can actually like take a punch and stuff like that and keep on moving. And then Tide of Escalation and Tide of Banishment. Now these ones are a little bit more, they're less utilitarian and they're more like more tailorable, as it were. So with Tide of Escalation, basically when you're in that tide, it allows you to cast your Brotherhood specific psychic power multiple times in the same phase. With different units, obviously, but in the same phase, just adding +1. So they basically become like Sanctic powers or like Smite. You can cast them multiple times, but the warp charge increases by 1 each time. So if you have, say, your Blades of Victory, and then you want the reroll charges from their psychic power, well, now you can cast it multiple times across multiple units and then get into melee, which might be more reliable maybe than the Tide of Celerity. Who knows, right? Or I guess you know. It's that, but that's down to you to make. And then the Tide of Banishment. Now this is the anti-demon tide, and I feel bad for all demon players. Now this is where we get our anti-demon punch back. You gain the unit gains the following ability each time they're in this tide, and it's the Banishment aura. While an enemy demon unit is within 6 inches of any of your units, subtract 2 from the leadership characteristic models in that unit. So demons rely on big, scary monsters and hordes of Gribblies, or hordes of lesser demons. This really hurts them for their leadership. And each time a model in that unit makes an attack against a demon unit, re-roll a hit roll of 1 and re-roll a wound roll of 1. So every time you make an attack against demons, you re-roll 1s to hit and wound. You don't care about character auras, it's just table-wide, because you Grey Knights have trained their entire lives to banish demons. It's their, like I said, it's their bread and butter. So, if you're against demons, you're definitely going to spend most of the game sitting in the Tide of Banishment, and it has some nasty results. But yeah, that's the tides. And then moving forward, we actually have our data sheets. So, it starts obviously with the man himself. People may call him Mary Sue, but it's Kaldor Drago, and he is a bad man. He is one of the very few characters still kicking that actually has a 3-up invulnerable shave, because he doesn't have a storm shield. He has the Sanctum Sigillium, or Sigillium. So sure, he's a little bit worse off against -1 AP weapons, but against any other weapons that target him, he is more survivable with that tasty 3-up invulnerable save. He has a mastercrafted Stormbolter, so it's damage 2. He has the Titan Sword, so it's strength 8, -4, flat 3 damage, can be boosted to flat 4 damage. With his Warlord trait, he ignores invul and save against demons. He's a little expensive. He's a little on the expensive side, but he has a lot of utility. Plus, he actually also has the Rites of Battle, so reroll 1s in a 6-inch aura of Grey Knights core units, and then he is the Supreme Grandmaster. So you can, in your command phase, select 1 friendly Grey Knights core or character unit within 6 inches, and they can reroll all hits until your next command phase. So he's just like a chapter master, and for what he does, like I said, he's expensive in a very expensive army, but for what he does, I think he is a bargain. You will see him in a lot of lists, and I plan on taking him a lot as well. Grandmaster Voldus. So, Grandmaster Voldus, he locks you into taking the Ward Makers, because that is his Brotherhood. And so he kept the Malleus Argyrum, Argyrum. So it's very similar to the Titan Sword. It's times 2 strength, so strength 8, -3, flat 3 damage. So it's not -4, but it also doesn't have the negative to hit. He's also rocking a mastercrafted Stormbolter, and he is one of the only characters that can attempt to cast 2 powers and deny 2 powers. So him and Drago are on the same level, casting wise. So if you're already taking Ward Makers and you don't want to fit in Drago and you're not bringing in Nemesis Dread Knight, Voldus is a very good character to run as well. Your regular Grandmaster, so he's your Space Marine Captain equivalent, Rites of Battle, Mastercrafted Stormbolter, stuff like that. And he is a psyker as well, so he can attempt to manifest and deny 1, and then he knows smite and 2 powers from the Dominus discipline. Moving on, we have the Grandmaster Nemesis Dread Knight. So literally the same, only he's now sitting in a baby carrier mech of doom. Lots of really good stuff in here. Like, you can stack your buffs with Servant of the Throne, Sigil of Exigence. He has the 4 shielding for the 4 up invuln save. He has a 2 up armor save. Strength 6, toughness 6, 13 wounds, 6 attacks. With the sword, you have the Mighty Strike, which is plus 4 strength, so strength 10, neg 3, d6 damage. His sweeping blow is strength user, so 6, neg 2, flat 2 damage, but he makes 2 hit rolls for each attack instead of 1, so he has 12 attacks coming down. And his weapon skill never degrades. It's his movement, ballistic skill, and attack count that do. So as long as he gets stuck in a melee, he doesn't care how hurt he is. He's still chugging out the attacks. And he can take the Gatling Silencer, Heavy Incinerator, Heavy Psycan. Really, really competitive option. CASTELLAN CROWE, really buffed up. Great model. Great model. And he's probably, if he wasn't in the Grey Knights book where they're so character or HQ heavy, he would almost be an auto-include in my book, because for his points cost, he is like the best beatstick you could ask for his points. He's dirt cheap. He's got 6 attacks. The Black Blade of Antwerp has been upgraded. It's no longer just a walking stick. It's plus 1 to his strength, neg 3, flat 2 damage. Any wound roll of 6, it does D3 mortal wounds in addition to any other damage. So, and he fights on death, even if he's already fought, which is because there's a stratagem in the stratagem section I didn't touch on, but basically, if a Grey Knight's character is killed before it gets to swing, they can attack. With CROWE, he has it built into his profile, and it kicks in even if he's already attacked. So say you charge him into Bellicor or something like that, and you swing and you hurt him, and he swings back and he kills CROWE, because, I mean, he is only a Marine, right? He swings again. So, fighting twice, 6 attacks, Black Blade of Antwerp. Same Cleansing Flame as the Purifiers, so plus 1 to cast. Martial Superiority. He fights first if it within engagement range of character units. Really good beatstick character. Really, really good in low points games. Yeah. And gorgeous model. I mean, you can take him by the look of the model alone. Brother Captain Stern. He also locks you into Ward Makers because that is his Brotherhood. Same Strands of Fate rule as before. Zone of Banishment is another upgrade over a regular captain that he has. Each time a model successfully manifests a psychic power, each demon unit within 6 inches suffers 1 mortal wound. So he's really good against demons. And if you're bringing the Ward Makers, I mean, why not, right? The model might need an update, convert him yourself, kind of that. But Brother Captain Stern, he is a classic. He's been here the longest, I think, out of all the other characters. You're the Brother Captain, very similar to Stern, just missing Strands of Fate. And these guys are basically your lieutenants in a Grey Knight's army. So they have the Tactical Precision aura. So reroll wound rolls of 1 for core units within 6 inches. Your Brotherhood champion, so he's much like CROWE, but not as good. But he does have the Brotherhood keyword. He's not a hallowed knight, as it were. Brotherhood Librarian, fantastic. Manifest 2, deny 1. So he one of the few characters with a stratagem that can cast 3. Like Voldus and Drago, I think, are the only other ones. Yeah. Brotherhood Tech Marine, surprisingly useful if you're bringing sword bearers. Nice little relic that as well that can be stacked with him to flat heal 3 on something and stuff like that. Brotherhood Chaplain, we've already talked about his synergies with his chants. We have the Brotherhood Terminator Squad. So these guys are quite expensive, in my opinion, for what they do. I'm still going to take them because Terminators are awesome. So I might not take as many. Strike Squads. Now these guys, these are the ones you're going to see a lot of or the Strike Squad chassis, as it were. So Purifiers, Purgators, Interceptors, Strike Marines. Because they're really cheap for what they do compared to Terminators. Because they got the additional wound. They have 3 attacks base now. That's the one thing, is we didn't get Shock Assault like other Marines. We just got the other attack permanently baked in. So I really appreciate that. Awesome stuff. 4 on the Justicar. Our 4th weapons are flat damage 2, no matter which flavor you take. Brotherhood Apothecary, good way to heal up some Terminators. Good way to have a 6-up shrug for non-mortal wounds. Brotherhood Ancient, another good character that you can combine with like his banner to give out buffs, and then maybe give him the Noble Death upgrade, and now he suddenly becomes like this center of OBSEC and like extra fightiness in the middle of the table. They're all fighting to protect the banner. Moving forward, we got the Paladin squad. Tons of attacks on these guys. 4 base attacks on Paladins, and they hit on 2s, all of them. Before it was just the Paragon that had a 2-up weapon skill. Now Paladins have a 2-up weapon skill as well. So these guys take a ton of attacks. Sure, they don't get the Brotherhood buffs, but they can still be benefited by Chaplain and stuff like that. Lots of play with Paladins, even if they are expensive. Yeah. And if you're, for the way I see it is, the points to upgrade a Strike to a Terminator, not worth it. But if you're paying to upgrade a Terminator, you might as well bring him as a Paladin. Really cool. Purifiers, they got their Cleansing Flame. They have their Stratagem support to give them -1 to all incoming damage. So if your enemy tries to mow you down with heavy bolters, you can pop 2 CP. Now they're only damage 1. Paladin Ancient, very similar to the Brotherhood Ancient, except he only buffs Paladins. So if you're bringing them, and you're not bringing Terminators to bring down with your Brotherhood Ancient, then bring a Paladin Ancient. Servitors, very useful in a Grey Knights list, in my opinion, because they are dirt cheap. They are like 70 points, or 80 points cheaper than your next cheapest infantry unit to be holding like the home objective or something. So Servitors are a great use for that in a very elite Grey Knights army. Venerable Dreadnought. If you're bringing a Dreadnought, you might as well bring a Venerable one, in my opinion, because the weapon skill 2+, the ballistic skill 2+, the 6-up shrug built in, the -1 damage. He gets the 5-up shrug to mortal wounds. Yeah, definitely worth the Venerable over the regular Dreadnought. Interceptor Squad's probably the best unit in the Codex. Just for their points and their mobility. They're almost like Harlequins. They ignore all intervening models and terrain when making moves, advances, charges, fallbacks, etc. So you can't pin these guys down, and they can shunt. They can do all that good stuff. Brigaders, that's your DACA. Really good if you use the Psychic Amplification Stratagem. I forget the exact name of it. We'll go back quick. Psychic Onslaught. If you use Psychic Onslaught on these guys, with the amount of heavy weapons they can bring, really useful. Nemesis Dread Knight. It's like your Grandmaster and Dread Knight light. Still really good. Their core, they have a 4-up invuln save. They're really cheap, in my opinion. They're great. Dread Knights are awesome. Best tanks in the game. So we have the Godhammer, the Crusader, the Redeemer. The Forge World book has the Banisher, which is like your fancy Grey Knight specific version. But yeah, in Sword Bearers, these guys could see a lot of like fun play, like I touched on, giving them 4-up invuln saves and stuff like that. Cybolt ammunition on them. Razorbacks Rhinos. Good argument to bring back Razor Rush like 5th edition with purifiers and stuff like that in a Sword Bearers list. Rhinos, really useful. I mean, they're Rhinos, right? Dirt cheap transport that you can, T7 transport that you can hide your very valuable Marines in, and keep the enemy's big guns at bay. Even if it's just for half a turn or whatever, it's still more than what you would have had before. Not sold on the Grey Knights Flyers, Stormhawk Interceptor, and the Storm Talon. I mean, they're okay, but I don't think that's what Grey Knights really do well. And the Storm Raven, it's great, but it's more expensive than the Land Raider. Yeah. It'll probably be the first thing to die if you bring it, and you're out like just under a quarter of your army. Like, it's ludicrous how expensive this guy can get. Yeah, so that's the Storm Raven. The weapon profile, so it touches on what Nemesis weapons are. So it's everything with Nemesis in the word or in the name: Nemesis Force Halberd, Demon Hammer, Great Sword, Great Demon Hammer on the Dread Knight, stuff like that. But it also is the Malleus Argyrum or the Titan Sword, and any relics that replace any other Nemesis weapons. Psi weaponry, anything with PSY or PSI in the name, so silencer, Psi cannon, Gatling silencer, heavy Psi cannon, or incinerators. Yeah, and that's it, guys. I mean, we got our profiles, and that's Grey Knights. Huge fan, love them. Expect to see lots of good Grey Knights videos coming out. I'll never forget my roots. I'll still be putting out orc content for you, but we're gonna start expanding into Grey Knights here soon, guys. I mean, I love them. So as always, thanks.
Sponsored by
Heed the prognosticars. Subscribe down below for more Grey Knights. Piety.
Big E over your shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like Olinius pious.
Ah.
That's their battle cry. We are the hammer.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, they're the hammer of Titan.
How did I not know that? Stop. And tap.